All right, let's start off on number 1 here. So I would, like it says here, use the vertex form, and I would actually just use the vertex to write the equation of the parabola. So I noticed the vertex right there would be at 3, 4. And so what I would say then is that I know that when I write my vertex form, there's some a value there, and then the x always gets switched in there, and then the y stays the same. And so with that, I can actually cross off d and b. And so I'm just left between A and C. And so between those two, I would notice that it's opening down, which I always know that means that A is negative. And so that to me tells me that A must be incorrect and C must be correct, because the negative out front would flip it upside down. All right, next up, number 2. So this one is asking us for the min or max value. The min or the max value is always the y value of the vertex. So I'm going to need to find that. But before I do that, I actually know that if this is a negative a value, that means it's an upside down parabola. And that actually means that it's going to be a max value. So I can already cross off A and I can cross off C, because because that negative 2 out front tells me that it's a opening down parabola, which means as a max. But now I need to find that value. So I do x equals negative b over 2a. And that's negative 4 over 2 times negative 2. So that's negative 4 over negative 4, which is 1. And so now I need to plug that back in to find y. So I'm going to go 2 times 1 squared plus 4 times 1 plus 8. We got to do PEMDAS here, so I got to do the exponent first. And then I got to do my multiplying. And now I'm going to add everything up. So negative 2 plus 4 is 2, plus 8 is 10. So it's a max of 10. All right, next up here. All right, next up, number 3 here, it says find the vertex to help select the correct graph. So I'm going to find the vertex again here. I'm going to do x equals negative b over 2a, since we're in standard form. So that's going to be positive 4 over 2 times 1, which is going to be 4 over 2, so x equals 2. And then I'm going to plug that back in to find y. So we got 2 squared minus 4 times 2 minus 3. So 2 squared is 4 minus 8 minus 3, and so that's negative 7. So my vertex here is 2, negative 7, and so it looks like the only one that's going to work here is A, because this vertex you can see right there is at 2, negative 7. All right, next up, number 4 here, so we're going to write the equation given the vertex and the point. So with this, we always start off with we just leave A as a variable. We kind of have to figure it out, and then for the vertex, I'm going to switch the x value and then keep the y value. And then I'm going to plug in my other point as an x, y here and figure out what A is. All right, so I got to do some PEMDAS here, so I need to do negative 1 plus 2 is 1. And so that just turns into 1a plus 3. And then if I subtract the 3, it says that a equals negative 4. So that means I can go back to this first step and just plug in the negative 4 for a. And find the answer, which would be B. All right, next up here on number 5, we want to solve this one with square roots. So I'm going to isolate the squared by dividing both sides by 3 first. I want to move that 3 over. And so I'm going to have this parentheses x plus 7 squared equals, 42 divided by 3. I don't know that one off the top of my head, so I'll do some long division here. It's like 14. So now I'm going to square root both sides, and that'll turn this into x plus 7. This one, since I created the square root, I need a plus or minus there, and then I don't know the square root of 14, so I just leave it like that. And then lastly, I'll just subtract this 7 over, so I'd say x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 14, and that's looking like D. Since one of those is I wrote that as 114, it's just 14. So since that rad 14 is a radical, I really can't add it together with the negative 7. All right, next up here, it asks me which one of these is a factor of this expression. So I'm just I don't see a GCF here, so I'm just gonna jump into my x here. So I have a times c up top, which is 60, and then 17 on bottom. All right, so what would that be? What multiplies to make 60? I know they have to both be positive, so 2 and 30 won't work. 3 and 10 is not gonna make 17 either. 4 and 15 is not gonna work either. 5 would multiply with 12, so that is going to work there. So I'll do 5 and 12. All right, I do have the 4 out front, which means I need to use my grouping technique or the inside-out box, and I'm going to split this 17x up into 5x and 12x, and move the 15 out there. I do use 5 and 12 because that's those numbers right there, but I do attach the x because it's got to add up to that middle term. Now I'm going to do my grouping here. The first group, I can only take out an x, and that leaves me with 4x plus 5. The second group, I can take out a 3, and that leaves me with 4x plus 5. So I'm going to then put one parentheses for the stuff outside and one for the stuff inside. And so it says, which of the following is a factor? So you can see they leave these in parentheses, so I just have to find the one that's there, and it looks like it is D. C is not quite right. It should be 4x plus 5. All right, same idea here for number 7. So for this one, once again, no GCF, so I'm just going to use my X box here. So we're going to think of two numbers that multiply to 30 and add to 11. And then I am, again, going to have to split this up into 3x squared and plus 10 and figure out what goes in the middle. So I think this one would be 6 and 5, so plus 6x and then plus 5x in any order. So then I'll group it up. In the first group, I can take out a 3x, leaving me with x plus 2. The second group, I can take out a positive 5, leaving me with x plus 2. So I get 3x plus 5 times x plus 2. So the only one that shows up there is B. All right, next up, the solutions here. I am going to have to factor this as well. So we're thinking of two numbers multiply to negative 30 and add to 7. And that's a positive 7 there. So I think that would be 10 and 3 with a negative 3. However, I do need to use the grouping here. So I have 2x squared, I have negative 15, and then I have 10x and negative 3x from here. So now I'll group these up. I'm going to take out a 2x, leaving me with x plus 5. I'm going to take out a negative 3, which also leaves me with x plus 5. So I have 2x minus 3 times x plus 5. And on this one, since they didn't leave it in parentheses, this means that I need to set this equal to 0, which means I need to split these up and set them equal to 0 individually and solve. So this one I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides, and I get x equals negative 5. And then this one I'm going to add 3, and then 2x equals 3, and then divide by 2. So x equals 3 over 2. So that would be B. All right, this one again we need to solve by factoring, but I do notice that these are all even here, so I can divide them all by 2. And so that's going to give me 2x squared plus, actually I should put the 2 out front, but 2x squared plus 14x minus 16. However, I notice that they're all still even again, so I can divide by 2 again and take 2 2's outside, and that'll leave me with x squared plus 7x minus 8. So now I can just factor that, and it's a lot easier to factor here. I get 8 and negative 1. I don't even need the grouping here because we have no number in front of x squared now, and I'll just combine these to make 4. And then since we're equal to 0 here, we need to split these up and set them equal to 0 individually. So this one's going to be x equals negative 8. And for x minus 1 equals 0, it would be x equals 1. And so that's looking like here. All right, next up here, you need to find the vertex and the y-intercept. So the vertex is really easy to see. We just switch the x value and keep the y value. So negative 2 comma 5, so it can't be C or D. And so now I need to find the y-intercept, and for the y-intercept, I have to plug in 0 for x, and so that's going to be negative 3 times 0 plus 2 squared plus 5. And so I get negative 3 times 2 squared plus 5, and then my exponent would turn this into 4. Multiplication would be negative 12 plus 5, which would be negative 7. All right, next up here, we got our vertex at 3 comma negative 4. And so this is actually very similar to a problem we already did, so I'm going to let you guys try this on your own. If you need any help, check number 4 for what we did there. It's really the same idea. All right, next up, number 12 here. This is kind of asking us about everything here, and it's select all that applies, so there may be multiple correct answers. I would first kind of state the vertex here. This is in vertex form right now, so that'd be 1 comma negative 27. And so if I kind of visualize this graph right here, 1 comma negative 27 would be like way down here, and then it's opening up from there since it's a positive a value. So let's see, axis of symmetry I can do next. Axis of symmetry is always x equals the x value of the vertex. So in this case, x equals 1. So I'd say H is correct and G is not. Oh, I also see that this vertex is correct. All right, and then next up, I would probably find the max or the min value. And so you can see the lowest point here at 1, negative 27 is the y value of the vertex, negative 27. So that one is correct. Next up, I might want to check part D here. So I would expand this. So I'm going to say 3 times x minus 1 times x minus 1 minus 27. I'll use the box here. So I get x minus 1 times x minus 1. X squared minus x plus 1. So 3 times x squared minus 2x plus 1 minus 27. I'm going to go ahead and distribute the 3 in there. So I get 3x squared minus 6x plus 3 minus 27. And if I combine those like terms, I get 3x squared minus 6x minus 24. So D is correct there. And so now I just need to find x and y intercepts. Now on this standard form, you can actually just see that the last number there is always the y-intercept. That's not the case on vertex form. So I know the y-intercept is b, negative 24. And so lastly, I just need to find x-intercepts, which I'll do in here. I'm going to find them out of standard form here. So I'm going to take this. I actually see that all of these can factor out a 3. And so that gives me x squared minus 2x minus 8. And then I can do an x on that, negative 8, negative 2. Would be 4 and 2 with a negative 4. So that would be x minus 4 times x plus 2 equals 0. And so I get x minus 4 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0. And if I add the 4, I get x equals 4 and x equals negative 2. So it looks like E is correct, but A is not because it's got to be a positive 4 for the x-intercept. All right, next up, they're asking me some more information here about a parabola, and so it's in standard form. So I always look here for the y-intercept first, is negative 8. And so I can already cross off some answers here because I need that negative 8 y-intercept. I also kind of know that if A is negative, then that means it's upside down, and that means that we have a max value. So I can actually already tell that this one, A, is wrong and C is correct because of that. If you did want to find the axis of symmetry, it's x equals negative b over 2a. So that's negative 12 over negative 6, which is 2, which you can see we do have there. And then the vertex, you'd have to plug that back in. So negative 3 times 2 squared plus 12 times 2 minus 8. So that would be negative 3 times 4 if we do our PEMDAS here. And then that would be negative 12 plus 24 after my multiplication. And so that would be negative 12 plus 24 is positive 12, minus 8 is 4. So everything really checks out on C there. All right, next up here, it's asking me, given this equation right there, what's the max height? So that's always the y value of the vertex. So I'm just going to follow my usual pattern. So x equals negative b over 2a. And so that's negative 60 over 2 times negative 10. So negative 60 over negative 20, which is 3. And then I do need to plug that back in to find y. And so I'll just do it as my PEMDAS, so exponents first. And then I get negative 90 plus 180 plus 6. So negative 90 plus 180 is 90, plus 6 is 96. All right, this one's asking it how long until the object hits the ground. So what's the height of the ground? Well, I would say the height of the ground is 0. So it looks like we're finding x-intercepts here, so I'm going to factor. I would first do a GCF here. I would actually take out a negative 2, which would switch this to t squared minus t minus 30. And then we're just going to factor it, multiplying to negative 30 and adding to negative 1, which would be 6 and 5 with a negative 6. And so then we can rewrite it as t minus 6 and t plus 5. And then I would split this up and say t minus 6 equals 0 and t plus 5 equals 0. So t equals 6 and t equals negative 5. Now, since we can't have negative time, you can't have negative 5 seconds, I would actually exclude the negative answer and just take the positive answer. All right, next up we need to describe the transformation. So we know that the plus 3 inside there is a shift left 3. And then the 1/2 out front, whenever that's less than 1, that is a vertical shrink. Next up, number 17, we want to solve with square roots. So I'm going to divide each side by 3. So x squared equals 25. And then I'll square root both sides, and x would equal plus or minus 5. Since I created the square root, I have to put a plus or minus. You could list those separately or as plus or minus. Number 18, I would need to divide this 2 over to the other side first. So I get x minus 3 squared equals 9. Then I'm going to square root both sides. So I get x minus 3 equals plus or minus 3. And then I'm going to add the 3 over. So I get x equals 3 plus or minus 3. Now I need to actually do this addition here. So I'm going to do 3 plus 3, which is 6. And then also 3 minus 3, which is 0. All right, lastly here, I want to solve this one. I'm going to subtract the 2 over first, so x squared equals 81. And then we'll square root both sides, so x equals plus or minus 9.